John Herron has fought tirelessly as a victims of crime advocate for victims and their families against a system in chaos. Now, just this week, you would have seen reporting that the Victorian Department of Justice awarded prisoners, yes, prisoners, a 4% pay rise, putting Victoria, according to Herron, at a relentless war with the Andrews government and a system that is not only broken but administered by out-of-touch, incompetent fools. Well, join us to discuss the decision to award prisoners a pay rise is no other than John Herron. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Michael.
Now, we're living in naughty land, or is this just once again, it seems that the perpetrators of crime, especially here in Victoria, have greater rights than the victims?
Yeah, look, that's a fact. Let this park the naughty land comment, or maybe Coosbane, the Muppets planet. But really, just the facts of, well, we need to really drill down on a couple of things today. So first of all, what prisoners are paid for and what they do, then it's not like some sort of wood workshop where they're all drilling away and making carpentry and whatnot. And I think, and I will say as well, and we'll get into it maybe later, that the recidivism and giving prisoners active and good skills is really important, because the majority cohort of prisoners is the thing that unites them is poverty. And they haven't had opportunities. That's a fact. So they haven't had a pay rise since 2015. So they had a minuscule amount, but that wasn't it. It was the signal quantum of 4.5% in doing that. So at the same time, have prisoners in the last few years what they've been through. So a lot of almost all prisoners in Victoria in sentencing now have received significant COVID discounts for being locked up. So I want to switch to say that that effect of announcing that quantum pay rise, not a big financial amount, but it signals like another reward for them to victims. And victims called me outraged. Again, not over the few dollars a week. It's about, yes, they're number one, and the rights of victims and the community are a distant last.
And just in contrast, we saw the prison guards, the ones who were bearing the cost of living pressures that we're all experiencing, the ones who were tasked with overseeing their imprisonment, they were awarded a 2.5% pay rise. I can't help but wonder how they feel about the prisoners getting a greater pay rise than them themselves.
I've spoken to some of them, and it's again, they're like victims insofar as it's just another slap in their face. They work really hard. They were under enormous pressure during COVID lockdowns. I've come across some of them that were doing 16-hour straight shifts, no breaks, right? And that's even in their rapid reaction force. So they're under a lot of pressure. So there's another side of that coin if you want to talk about the guards and the prisoners, because the prisoners themselves have transformed given the Andrews government and who he's appointed cronies, etc. Certainly drills down into corrections and who's running that now. But that's actually prisoners know now that they can get away with anything. In the past, if they misbehaved, etc., they'd be shifted to higher security prisons, maximum security. They'd lose privileges. They could, if they stabbed, or as they call it, sieved someone, they could expect a couple of years extra. Now they can rumble with a prison guard and bash them, and nothing is done. Now word quickly spreads amongst prisoners, so they're actually out of control at the moment in prisons.
And John, when it's called the administration of justice, that's what we're actually talking about. Those who administer the justice system.
That's right.
The DOJ, that's where the problem seems to lie, doesn't it?
All across the board, I mentioned it on Sky News, right? Because people always go, oh, it's the justice system, it's justice system. The regime in Victoria actually likes that being spread because, and I've heard some of them say to me, I've been in meetings and they go, oh, I'm doing the best I can, but it's the system limits me, right? The Westminster system and justice systems that we have work very well in other countries and states, but why not here? It's the people that administer justice in Victoria. And it is wider than those. when you say justice portfolio, there's a whole lot of little agencies out there, and like particularly in the family violence space where it's absolute chaos, right? But people moving through the system encounter courts, a few encounter prison. The prison population is only about 5,500 or 6,000 now. So it's right across the board. There's in the thing of appointments, right? Who they appoint now. We need to drill rather than brush across that. Certain people in the judiciary, etc. That's what we are here now, not because of the system, but because of those people.
Those who administer it, the bureaucrats.
Yes.
John, we've seen some horrific outcomes, and as you mentioned before, the push to stop recidivism, the programs and courses and opportunities that are provided are vital, because we don't want it to become a revolving gate. As you say, a lot of the people there end up there because of their upbringing, their situation, their circumstances, a lack of opportunities. This whole prison's not the answer, it just makes them worse. Are we missing the point that we should be fixing the prison and the courses and the things they're forced to undertake while they're in there to stop it, rather than just going, well, prison doesn't work, so let's leave them out in the community?
Yeah, so the Andrews regime uses the thing restorative justice. If you remember when ex-AG Attorney General Holes recently, someone broke into his car and he spoke about, I want to know why they did it, and restorative justice. So one of the biggest not just misconceptions, but completely misleading, is that the prisoners are receiving services in jail. So I'll start from the top, like the administration of health services to them, particularly when more than half of them have mental health issues. They're receiving no help whatsoever. My daughter's killer received no help whatsoever. I have clients that are prisoners now. They can't get medication. One can't get Panadol, right? There's that at the top. Then they can't have courses, educational things are not done for them. Drug and alcohol counselling, etc., voluntary, haphazard. Some of the prison farms, like in Victoria, Langi, Kalkal and Durrangal, are really good. Indeed, they're known, people buy their produce in the area because it's the best, and they're really, really well run. That's great for prisoners. That's a sliver of the prisoners. The rest receive nothing. They sit around idly talking to each other. So restorative justice means putting them out the street earlier, which is worse. They know themselves that they get inside and they're just discarded, right? So what's corrections about? Well, that's all about 1,000. It's about 5,000 cronies. Not all of them, of course, but since again, what Andrews did is just clean out that space in 2018, and it's ongoing, just putting more and more kids, Labor Party relatives, officials. It's an exciting place to work, big money involved in it. And so corrections over the years was a really specialised area, and they had people that had worked up, and the best of the best were, when I had to deal with them, say 8-10 years ago, were really, really good people. They ran the prisons really well. Prisoners respected the situation in there. They're all gone. And not only that, I have cases on my books of corrections sacking the experienced ones for any trumped up reason whatsoever to get them out, right? And that's an example. That's how Andrews rules with the public service, rules with fear. So then anyone, like, another reason why prisons are out of control, because, okay, you can do this in something like Department of Transport and your trains don't run, but nothing gets built. But here, this prisons pick up on that, right? And it's dangerous. It's dangerous for the guards, and then ultimately dangerous for the community when these people are let out early. So
it's and when I hear the catchphrase, you can't arrest your way out of this, well, you actually could if, following the arrest, the programs and the processes were put in place that actually had some impact on those that have, for whatever reason, have led them to that point where they commit these crimes. It's
totally. And
it's a start. It's not the end.
No, there's a second part of that. So that's when you're inside, right? So to reduce the amount of sentencing, what was put in place was sort of bail laws were changed. The current Attorney General's flagged that they're going to be relaxed even further, or reform of bail laws. That means easy ones. But when they're released from prison, there's no monitoring whatsoever. I'll use the example of my daughter's killer. Like, he told me he was going to go off the radar. He just vanished. Right? He was only given a corrections order or bail because he agreed to all of these, just using this as an example, like drug and alcohol courses, some mental health treatment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He just vanished. So when we had corrections under the blowtorch, we said, sort of, how long would it be before he would be picked up? And they alluded to like 5-6 months. Of course, in the interim, he killed my daughter after being out for 6 weeks. And the other side of that I've seen, that prior to my daughter's release, there was 14 killers on parole or bail in the previous 2 years. That makes people on bail the largest cohort of murderers in Victoria. Now, they're under the supervision of corrections if they're under an order, and corrections are not supervising them.
Mm. And that's what people need to realise. The parole system is a good system because it means rather than serve 5 years, you're out, we've got no oversight, no supervision, you do as you like. Instead of 5 years, you do 3 years. And then for the next 2 years, we watch you like a hawk. We make sure you follow the rules. And if you don't, you're back in. But they don't follow them like a hawk or make sure they follow the rules.
Maybe like, let's look at sex offenders, okay? So you can have a prolific sex offender. Usually they offend hundreds. They don't just have one victim. Usually it's in the hundreds, maybe. It is mind-boggling if you see this. Now, they might only, to get them plead guilty, you might let them admit to 1 or 2 crimes, because that's how it's done in court now. So they might do 2 years' time. So I will say this, in the past, corrections used to put various orders on them and conditions that they would have to adhere to keep them off the streets and away from children, these types of things. I can't see that being affected now. They're probably just, if they could walk out now, knowing corrections in Victoria, they could walk out and offend and nobody cares, right? Yeah. They leave it to the police to pick it up.
Now, John, am I right in saying with your daughter's case, when he was released on a community corrections order with all of those conditions you just mentioned, and yet they released him with no contact details, no place of address, so no way, absolutely no way of checking or having him brought in or even contacting him and saying, have you met your obligations?
No, they didn't bother. They stopped tracking him. In fact, they sent a few emails and he gave them a number where he didn't have a phone. So they just let it roll. Where he was living, they released it because his parents said that they'd find him accommodation. So he just went. A lot of them at that time, they actually get accommodation at youth hostels. So they end up there off the street. So good luck, backpackers. But because that's where they end up, at youth hostels in the city or in a city area. So yeah, he had all those conditions and he fulfilled none of them. And they put in the odd, when I say attempt to contact him, they might have had an address, made one phone call once a month. Right. So again, that went on to week 6. He rocked up out of his own fruition to one correction site at Heidelberg, and they just let him go. They noted on their file that he turned up there, right? That was their defence. But did they try and install anything for him? What? No, not so. Even the mental health thing, that his conditions of release said he would receive all this mental health treatment, psychologists, etc., etc. So in the one and only meeting they had with him, they told him that, and they said, "Oh, you got to go and like to a GP and book mental health services," which you do. He goes, "I haven't even got a Medicare card. I can't." That was the end of the conversation.
Yeah, and let's be clear too. There's a separation between the Office of Public Prosecutions and the police, and then the judges and the Department of Health as well. So the police do their bit. They catch him, they lock him up, they say, great, here are the charges. the Office of Public Prosecution at the moment seems to want to take whatever deal, whatever plea that they can get, rather than pursuing the outcome, because they just want it to go away. So as far as victim impacts, when somebody has been caught dead to rights for murder, and then they go, look, if we get them for manslaughter, they'll agree to it. We'll cut their maximum from 25 down to 8, and it's done. You've actually been on the end of the receiving end of that as a family member of somebody who was murdered. How much further does that add pain and impact?
Oh, a lot. It's the families that I support. For the I get cases every week, people coming to me like murder charges drop, this type of thing all the time. I'm very surprised they actually prosecute any of them, for the reason generally that you said. That you're also going to say that, again, like everyone else in the Victorian, the regime's administration, they're way out of their depth, right? So you also mentioned various arms, like in a Westminster system, mostly in the justice space, that is completely collapsed, ceased to exist. It's all one arm, right? So I've seen a case with the Forrest family where the DPP got the Attorney General to intervene to stop them getting support, which proves like that's the police, the same thing. Courts is a bit different. I think that there's still a lot of integrity, particularly hardworking magistrates, and they're absolutely stoned. But they have to cope with, believe it or not, they're at the front end. So the administration behind that is absolutely chaotic with courts. It is a literal disaster, right? Again, I go this morning for an intervention order for a woman in crisis, right? They denied putting one on, and this happens to me every week, I see, because it was an administrative thing and they're seeing it next week. And they have to, I could hear them behind the counter, oh, what do I do this time? How do I do this? How do I enter that? That's what's there now, right? That wouldn't have occurred 5 years ago. The registrar would say, this is what you do, I'll help you out or not. The thought of the woman that I was trying to protect is gone. It's only, they operate now, they don't operate in all that Westminster space. And it's an Aussie thing probably. It's a risk management scenario. So they press a button whether, if I don't help this person, will it come back on me? Yes, I will help them. If it blows up and nothing will happen, okay, I'm not going to help them, right? And how does it affect my paperwork and administration? That's where they come from. You go to the counter of the police, that's what you get now. You don't get, and a lot of the police are handcuffed with that. It's not their lack of wanting to do things, but the chaotic system brought in by the Andrews regime limits their ability to fully function in their role, right? It is again, it's completely collapsed, and this is just Zimbabwe. There's no other way to describe it.
And a lot of the rhetoric when we hear around when there's something horrific and they're actually pushed to do something because of the outcry in the media, when you actually listen to it, we're increasing the maximum sentence for this crime now, but nothing for the minimum, and no one gets the maximum. So they effectively done nothing. There's no further deterrent, because it was always 2 years for this crime up to 10 years. Well, now it's up to 12 years, but I'm still going to get out in 2 years because it's the minimum.
That's right. Yeah. Look, even I had a discussion once with the head of the adult parole board. He told me that he referred to prisoners and bail. He goes, oh, if bail was tightened, there'd be a revolt in the prisons, right? If you're on a flip side to Thomas Embling, the psych hospital with all the psychopaths. So I actually saw a journalist asking them questions, and it's on their website too. They couldn't believe it, that they were talking about day release after 1 and 2 years for some of these people that have killed multiple people. And they actually said, if we don't give them day release, they'll turn around and maybe harm the staff. Okay, so what does that say? That they're running the show, right? And that is a factor too. Back in jail, similar situation, right? If you tighten things, but and just for the sake of it, that's not a good outcome to do that. But you've got to these corrections people, and I said 5,000 or more of them, right? And can you imagine what the leadership is now? Because I've seen it. It's not that old cadre. It is again kids, and and Labor Party operatives that don't have any experience in the space. So what do is that they just protect their jobs and sack anyone that puts their hand up or does their job properly. So that's the crux. When you talk about the inexperience of these people, we need to drill down on that, right? So as an example, could you contact any of them and get them on your show?
No.
Would they be able to articulate because of course they've got to answer for everything. Would they be able to, in a public forum, articulate and explain why that's a good thing?
No.
Do they have a LinkedIn profile?
No.
So what does that tell you, right? They are completely way out of their depth and don't know what they're doing. And I've seen them at things like tender. I remember a deputy commissioner of corrections, right, for once had to front up to a tender and answer questions, and it was amusing. I was sitting in the back row, and when she was asked, "Why are you doing this? Why is that? Was that?" Her mouth opened like a goldfish. Right? There was no answer. No answer came out. And the last person in corrections he had rock up for a press interview was Emma Cassar, head of hotel quarantine. Now, and she was an absolute darling of the regime. So I rocked up to a hotel quarantine press conference, got absolutely slaughtered, started crying, and staggered away. That was the last time anyone in that space made a public appearance. But they're holding lives to ransom here, and their inactions and inexperience are causing people to be killed.
Yeah, we've seen the outcome. We've seen your daughter, Courtney. We've seen Jill Maher. We've seen the Burke Street. All of these people were on bail. All of these people.
Yes, all
had
of them.
serious issues. And, you know, we're going to wind it up here, but I just want everybody watching to take away what John said. The largest cohort of murderers in Victoria have been people on bail. On bail.
That's
largest group of murderers. If that's not preventable, is it foreseeable? With hindsight, it certainly is now. Going forward, should it change looking back? What do you think?
Absolutely. Well, that's up to the viewers to think about that. But I think sadly now we're at a stage where people don't worry about it unless it happens to them. But I can assure you, the actions of the Andrews regime making it far more likely to happen to you than you might think.
And Rob Holes is the perfect example of that. One of the architects of it. Suddenly he wears the consequences of it, and now he's like, oh, yeah, things might need to change. All right, John, we're going to leave it there. Thanks for your time, and keep fighting the good fight.
Thanks, Michael.